Straight to a Fox News alert breaking overnight. A gunman ambushes two Los Angeles County deputies outside a Compton train station. Surveillance video shows the suspect walking up to their cruiser and opening fire. Both deputies are in critical condition.
The two deputies were doing their job and seeing somebody just walk up and just start shooting on them. It pisses me off.
The sheriff says both deputies were sworn into office just 14 months ago in the same class. One of them, a 31-year-old mother, the other, a 24-year-old man.
Video shows the officers in riot gear arriving at the hospital after protests blocked the emergency room entrance, and protesters were reportedly chanting, "We hope they die." Let's bring in Bernie Kerik, former NYPD commissioner, to join us. Bernie, let's just ask you off the top your reaction to both of those notes here today, both what happened involving the shooting and the protesters outside the hospital.
Guys, look, this is reminiscent of what happened back in the 70s and 80s with the Black Liberation Army, the Black Panther Party. And Black Lives Matter is an extenuation of that. Black Lives Matter was inspired by the BLA, by Assata Shakur. Black Lives Matter has people working for them that were a part of that movement back in the 70s and 80s that was responsible for assassinating close to a dozen, or more than a dozen cops, almost 24 cops over a 10-year period. The bottom line is this has to stop. The Justice Department has to go after Black Lives Matter, after Antifa, and put an end to this.
Bernie, you now see in New York City, the anti-police sentiment is completely out of control. You had more than 100 Black Lives Matter protesters shutting down the George Washington Bridge. Then there was a violent clash with them and police outside an NYPD precinct. There is an enormous failure of leadership on the part of the mayor here. I would argue on the part of the governor as well when it comes to this issue. What should they be doing?
All of them, the mayor, the governor, the city council. Every one of them are responsible for allowing this stuff to happen. Blocking vehicular traffic, pedestrian traffic is a crime. Resisting arrest is a crime. Obstructing justice is a crime. Assault on cops is a crime. Every single person on that bridge should have been arrested, period. We arrested 700 people on the Brooklyn Bridge one time. 700 were arrested on the Brooklyn Bridge for getting on there when they weren't supposed to be. The bottom line is it can be done if you have the leadership that's going to do it, and you don't have that in the mayor, the governor, and the city council in New York City.
Bernie, you mentioned the similarities between what we saw in the 70s and 80s with radical elements. There's a big difference between that and today, though. Today, the whole Black Lives Matter, whether it's a slogan, whether it's the organization, whether it's the movement, whatever you want to call it, I mean, it's painted on the center court of NBA basketball courts. This is something that's been fully mainstreamed. How do you target the Marxist elements of this organization within a society that says Black Lives Matter is who we should be elevating?
Well, first of all, I think you have to educate the American public because they're stupid. They're following, you know, I ride through New Jersey, communities in New Jersey, and I see these signs in people's windows, Black Lives Matter. They have no conception of what the organization stands for. They have no conception of who the leaders are, how they were inspired, what they believe. They have no idea. So the bottom line is you have to educate the American public on what reality is, and you have to call out sports, you know, these $1 million sports figures that are supporting Black Lives Matter. It's not about Black lives. They're not concerned about Black lives because if they really were, they'd be protesting in Chicago, in Minneapolis, in Atlanta, where there's the systemic slaughter of Black lives on a daily basis by other Blacks. Nobody cares about this. This is an anti-government, anti-police, Marxist movement that people are supporting because they're ignorant.
Bernie, I think you lay out the connections very well. I've had these debates for quite some time. There are very sincere people out there who believe that Black Lives Matter, who understand that racism is something we all want to overcome in this country, but don't understand both the political platform of the organization Black Lives Matter, its underlying ideology, which dates back to the 60s in critical race theory, and the connection that you lay out that it animated those radicals in the 70s. It's all connected, and it's incumbent upon all of us to tell the truth and educate everyone on the historical background and published underlying ideas of today. I want to do one more thing with you, Bernie, if we can, before we lose you. I want to play you a sound from an interview Pete did earlier with Mark McCloskey and Patricia McCloskey, the homeowners in St. Louis who are facing charges for brandishing weapons when protesters broke through their gates. I want you to listen to this. I want to get your reaction from earlier on Fox and Friends.
Now, these 9 people have been sent over to the circuit attorney's office, so we don't know, Kim Gardner, if she's going to charge these people. I suspect there won't be any charges even for these 9 people.
The tragedy out in Compton, California, and these kinds of protests that the government not just tolerating, but encouraging these kinds of protests. Think about it. 2 deputies shot and the, quote, protesters, the mob, are blocking the hospital. This isn't a coincidence. This is because of the exact same thing. Cori Bush, the mob outside my house, was chanting, "You can't stop the revolution." And who's stopping it? I mean, the Democrat-run cities, they're encouraging it. They're encouraging violence.
So, Bernie, I think this further illustrates your point. There are innocent, sincere people who want to see a better society. Then there's a political platform, and then there are governments who are not just tolerating, but seemingly encouraging these types of protests and movements.
You know what, guys, I was actually with the McCloskeys last week. Rudy Giuliani and I went out there to see them. We also went to the funeral for Officer Bohannon that was shot and killed there. The bottom line is, Mark McCloskey is absolutely, if that's who was speaking, is absolutely right. You know, Kim Gardner, the prosecutor there, is a Marxist. Kim Gardner was put in office by Soros. Kim Gardner is the same one that went after a Republican governor, Eric Greitens, destroyed his career, and her investigator wound up being charged in a 7-count indictment for wrongfully going after him and targeting him. The bottom line is, this is all about a revolution, and you have prosecutors, unfortunately, out there that are behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Bernie, so much for being here. Challenging times we're in, particularly challenging time to be a law enforcement official. So our thoughts go out to them every single day for fighting out there to keep us safe. Thank you for your thoughts today.
Thank you.
Bernie.